How did mankind come into existence? Is it the result of purposeful creation? Or did it occur by chance? What exactly defines a human? Physical body, mind, consciousness? Is there something beyond these? Let's explore science, the Bible, the Vedas, and ancient Egyptian wisdom to seek similarities and differences, and perhaps uncover answers to these profound questions. Before we dive in, please like, subscribe, and share this video with anyone who might enjoy it. Your support really helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate it. Among the considered concepts, only science dismisses anything in humans except the physical body, probably as this is the only detectable object. Even consciousness is explained as property of brain activity, yet throwing a bridge from neurons and impulses to consciousness needs the answer to the fundamental question: who is the entity initiating thoughts represented by brain activity? Neurobiologists have yet to address the deeper question of what happens at the very moment before a thought emerges. Similarly, physicists and astrophysicists are still searching for answers to what is smaller than the smallest particles discovered so far, or what preceded the Big Bang, especially given that science now largely agrees there was no bang in the conventional sense. These questions are crucial for understanding our reality, as they touch on deeper, fundamental issues. Why does anything exist? Who or what drives existence? Essentially, who is the creator? And all these questions have no answer from a scientific perspective, and even the idea of the creator is strongly debated and ending with denial. Though science is not jurisprudence, there is no presumption of non-existence. Just because something is not proven does not mean it does not exist. In other words, the hypothesis of God is viable until it is proven wrong. So far, neither God's existence nor God's absence has been scientifically proven. Therefore, from a purely scientific approach, scientists should consider the idea of God alongside all other hypotheses. Anyway, now science explains the appearance of humans through the process of evolution, where modern Homo sapiens are the result of millions of years of gradual change, adaptation, and the natural selection of advantageous traits. The evidence that science uses includes: the fossil record provides physical evidence of human evolution, showing a gradual progression of traits such as brain size, tool use, and skeletal adaptations for walking upright. Genetic studies show that all humans today share a common ancestor from Africa. The comparison of human DNA with that of other species, such as chimpanzees, shows a 98 to 99% genetic similarity, further confirming humans' close relationship with other primates. Once have traced the maternal and paternal lineages of all humans back to Africa, often referred to as mitochondrial Eve and Y-chromosomal Adam, who lived tens of thousands of years apart. Connection with biblical Eve is not occasional. Mitochondrial Eve refers to the most recent common matrilineal ancestor of all living humans, meaning she is the woman from whom all current humans inherited their mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondria are organelles in cells that produce energy, and they have their own DNA, which is passed down only from mother to offspring. Mitochondrial Eve is not the only woman alive during her time, but she is the one whose lineage survived through uninterrupted female-to-female transmission. Mitochondrial Eve is estimated to have lived around 100,000 to 200,000 years ago, most likely in East Africa, during the early stages of modern human evolution. Similarly with Y-chromosomal Adam, because the Y chromosome is passed down directly from father to son, geneticists can trace paternal ancestry by analyzing the Y chromosome's genetic markers. He is estimated to have lived around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago, though estimates vary. Importantly, Y-chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve did not live at the same time. They are ancestral points in separate, independent genetic lineages, the paternal and maternal. This evidence indeed shows the evolution of species. However, it says nothing about how this evolution happened. Scientists say evolution happened due to mutations and natural selection, but this raises even more questions. Let's go through only some of them. Lack of fossil evidence. There is a lack of fossil evidence. The fossil record does not provide a complete, continuous sequence of intermediate forms, and there are significant gaps that raise questions about how species, including humans, transitioned from one form to another. If evolution occurred due to random mutations, the distribution of changes should be continuous, not discrete. This doesn't mean evenly distributed, but continuous nonetheless. In contrast, intentional changes from an external source would produce a discrete distribution. Yes, it is related to the measurement steps, but exactly the gaps in the fossil record are particularly large. We don't observe gradual changes. Instead, we see jumps from one DNA form to another, with differences of hundreds or even thousands of changes occurring simultaneously. It's like going to a rocky beach and measuring the stones, only to find that all the sizes are whole inches. 1, 2, 3, and so on, without any in-between measurements like 1.5, 2.7, or 3.3 inches. Would that be strange? Yes. Would that raise an assumption they were manufactured? Yes. From a mathematical perspective, the distribution should be continuous due to the gradual process of natural change. The same principle applies to the fossil record. The Cambrian explosion problem. On the other hand, there is the Cambrian explosion problem, which refers to a period around 540 million years ago, when most major animal groups appeared abruptly in the fossil record, with relatively little evidence of preceding evolutionary development. This sudden appearance of complex organisms contradicts the gradualism expected by Darwinian evolution, though this issue relates more broadly to evolution rather than specifically to human evolution. Natural selection. Science currently counts 1.7 million species on Earth, and over 5 billion species have died out. Given the age of the Earth at 4.5 billion years, and even if 500 million years were spent for the formation before life could start appearing, it gives a proportion of one species to 0.8 years. However, life development needs time, and 9 women cannot give birth to a child in 1 month, so species could appear in bursts, but it still means that every, let's say, 80,000 years, approximately 100,000 species should have appeared. However, we don't see this process continuing. At least for the last 2,000 years, we didn't get over 2,500 new species. Moreover, they die out, as they cannot adjust to the changing environment. So why did this adjustment stop? Consider Darwin's example of the giraffe. Only those with longer necks could reach food in times of scarcity, leading to their survival and the propagation of their genes. Yet, do we observe modern giraffes with significantly different neck lengths? Why has this selection seemingly stopped? Perhaps because it never worked as hypothesized. Reality shows outcomes that contradict these predictions. Horizontal gene transfer. Another problem with natural evolution is the movement of genetic material between different species. This challenges the traditional tree of life model of evolution, where species evolve only through vertical inheritance, from parent to offspring. It raises questions about the strict linearity of evolutionary descent. This gene transfer is similar to modern genetic modification when, for example, genes from Arctic fish, which produce antifreeze proteins, are inserted into tomatoes to make them more cold-resistant. But this is artificial modification. How and why did it happen during natural self-evolution? Hominin species overlap and coexistence. The fossil record shows that several hominin species coexisted at the same time, such as Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo floresiensis, and early Homo sapiens. Evolutionary theory would suggest that one species should outcompete the others, yet these groups lived alongside each other for extended periods, and even had interbreeding connections. Genetic evidence shows that modern humans have a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA, indicating that interbreeding. This challenges the traditional model that Homo sapiens completely replaced Neanderthals. The paradox lies in the fact that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals are considered different species, but species by definition should not be able to produce fertile offspring. It's unclear how these species interacted and why they coexisted without a clear winner, as traditional natural selection models would predict. Species do not naturally mate with one another even though they don't know who they are, as we assume. A lion doesn't know that it's a lion, and a tiger doesn't know that it's a tiger, and still, they do not mate. But scientists tried to mix them, and it took years of precise, intentional scientific work on artificial insemination to get a surviving example of a liger, a mix of lion and tiger. And again, even though females of that breed are fertile, males are sterile. Then how on earth, in all senses, could something similar happen naturally? And not just once, but enough times with different species to replace the previous populations or create new competing ones. The evolution of bipedalism. The transition from quadrupedal to bipedal locomotion in human ancestors is another challenging technical problem. While several hominins show evidence of bipedalism, there is little agreement on what specific environmental pressures led to this change, and how bipedalism evolved without compromising other survival traits like speed, balance, and energy efficiency in early human ancestors. Also, natural selection should favor traits that increase an organism's fitness, but many human traits seem neutral or even maladaptive. For example, humans are prone to back problems, weak joints, and other conditions resulting from bipedalism, which call into question the efficiency of natural selection in shaping optimized human anatomy and physiology. Mutations. According to the scientific model, DNA development happened due to spontaneous mutations and their further natural selection. On the other hand, genetics says that 99.5% of human DNA is so-called junk DNA, and the only purpose it has is to prevent the accumulation of mutations. As mutations are evenly spread throughout the DNA according to probability theory, so fewer of them happen in the coding part, 0.5%. So first of all, it is very arrogant to call junk the 99.5% of something, the purpose of which is unknown. But even if we assume this is true, only if, then it means a great contradiction, that DNA self-develops by mutations, and at the same time creates extremely sophisticated mechanisms to prevent those mutations, including numerous incredible protections, such as DNA polymerase proofreading function during DNA replication, mismatch repair systems that detect and correct base mismatches that escape polymerase proofreading, base excision repair that targets small damage caused by oxidation or spontaneous chemical changes, the nucleotide excision repair system to repair bulky lesions caused by UV radiation or environmental insults, direct reversal repair, double-strand break repair to fix the most dangerous types of damage, cell cycle checkpoints to monitor DNA integrity, apoptosis as programmed cell death to prevent the propagation of mutations, telomere maintenance to prevent genome deterioration, antioxidant defense mechanisms to prevent oxidative damage, epigenetic control to maintain genome stability, transcription-coupled repair to ensure active genes are repaired promptly, post-replication repair to deal with errors that escape detection during DNA replication, DNA damage signaling that detects damage and coordinates the cell's response. I wish digital databases in our intelligent human world could be that protected. And all these mechanisms appeared due to what they are protecting from, mutations. This is not a paradox, as scientists call it. This is nonsense at its core. The complexity and precision of these protective mechanisms reflect the extraordinary intricacy of life. The processes that protect and maintain our genetic code are indeed awe-inspiring. Even these mutation protections are enough to see how weak and hopeless the natural evolution hypothesis is. But let's find more. Another question is, how could DNA develop itself that dramatically? Like changing the number of chromosomes, for example. Current genetics states that increasing or decreasing the number of chromosomes can happen, for example, due to Robertsonian translocation, which is a specific mutation during cell division. Even humans can have 22 or 24 pairs of chromosomes, instead of the regular 23. But when a mutation happens in nature, changing the number of chromosomes in a creature, in most cases this individual will not survive due to miscarriage or chromosomal diseases. And if it does survive, it will most likely be infertile. And even if fertile, it will create a species with the inherited mutation, which again will have the lowest chances to survive, provide offspring, and propagate these genes further into a larger population. That doesn't sound like a healthy or stable way to develop. Even in this case, the probability of propagating the mutation is small if mutated and non-mutated individuals mate. So many factors work to eliminate mutations, making such a branch of the population a convergent sequence and a dead end. Mathematically and logically, it cannot be a predominant mechanism for life to evolve. It should also be taken into account that the vast majority of mutations are neutral, around 90 to 95%. A smaller percentage is harmful, around 2 to 5%, and an even smaller fraction is beneficial, less than 1%. So the evolutionary process relies on this tiny fraction of beneficial mutations, which, as supposed, over long periods of time, can lead to the development of new traits and species adaptability. Again, this works against the principles we observe in nature. The waiting time problem. Another showstopper for the mutation concept is the waiting time problem. Mathematical models that calculate the time needed for certain mutations to arise and become fixed in a population suggest that for some complex genetic changes, the required time far exceeds the available evolutionary timescale. This problem becomes especially pronounced when multiple coordinated mutations are needed to produce a new, advantageous trait. This discrepancy raises huge doubts about random mutation and natural selection being able to adequately explain the speed of observed evolutionary changes. For example, humans and gorillas differ in DNA by 1.6%, Given 3 billion base pairs in the human genome, this difference amounts to 3 million base pairs changed. Even if we forget about the mutation being assessed by nature as an error in the DNA process, the probability of those 3 million changes is incredibly, unimaginably small. Yes, science works with incredibly small probabilities, but on an infinite scale, because infinity is always infinitely bigger than whatever huge time is needed for the smallest probability imaginable, which makes this probability work out. This way, many events are possible on an infinite scale of the universe. But Earth has a limited amount of time of existence according to the same science, and those scales of time and probabilities are not working together to let very low likelihood events happen on a stable basis. Let me provide some numbers to illustrate this. In 2013, a study by S. L. Miller and J. L. Bada discussed the likelihood of forming organic compounds from simple molecules in the primordial soup. This probability was calculated as 10 to the negative 12th power. To feel that probability, imagine you have an ideal figure with 100 billion faces, all blank except for one marked in some way that doesn't impact the probability of falling, and you toss this figure, like dice, every second. The marked face will fall out with a probability of 10 to the negative 12th power, meaning it will appear on average once every 3,000 years of every second tossing. And what if we consider another molecule to form with the same probability? It's like tossing another figure of 100 billion faces every second, and the needed face will fall out, again, every 3,000 years on average. But what if we need two molecules to form simultaneously? Then, in the suggested allegory, two marked faces of two figures should fall out together. The probability of this event is the multiplication of the probabilities of each event, giving 10 to the negative 24th power. This means that tossing two figures together every second, the two marked faces will appear on average once every 9 billion years. A reminder: Earth's age is 4.5 billion years for comparison, and if the third event should happen simultaneously, then its probability will be added to the multiplication, adding orders to the time needed. Even if tossing is happening faster, the number of events needed to create extremely complex life will increase the needed time by orders of magnitude. And then 4.5 billion years is nothing on the scale of probabilities, just the universe has blinked. This low probability of just simple molecules appearing makes the amazingly complex world diversity impossible to happen within only 4.5 billion years. Therefore, the study by S. L. Miller and J. L. Bada was not widely accepted. In contrast, without providing updated calculations, the scientific world focused on criticism, saying recent advances in experimental techniques and theoretical models offer a broader perspective on how molecular formation might occur under varied conditions, potentially making the process appear more feasible than earlier estimates suggested. Potentially. No alternative calculation suggested. For sure, the conditions at the moment of Earth's formation can only be modeled, and there is always room for deviation. But still, the likelihood of every event needed for life to self-appear, for every new species to appear, or for that incredibly diverse life to exist, makes 4.5 billion years not enough, if it's possible at all. No matter how enormous 4.5 billion years seems to the human mind, as it tends to compare it with durations we can experience. What works for infinite scales in astrophysics does not work on the brief moment of Earth's life. It is a common skepticism, especially considering how complex life forms like humans evolved. The process of random mutations, natural selection, and the stabilization of complex DNA systems might seem unlikely to occur within such a limited time. Many skeptics highlight the problem of time as a challenge to the standard evolutionary timeline. Information theory and DNA complexity. DNA is often compared to a digital code due to its role in storing and transmitting genetic information in a manner similar to how computers store and process data. The creation of such a highly complex system through random mutations and natural selection seems improbable. Generating new, functionally coherent genetic information would require an intelligent source, as random changes alone seem insufficient to explain the origin of sophisticated biological instructions within DNA. Its capacity to store complex information in a compact structure is astounding. It achieves a high degree of data compression that makes it an effective storage medium. A single gram of DNA could theoretically store around 215 petabytes of data, which adds to the notion that DNA resembles an expertly designed code or language. In information theory terms, DNA contains functional information that appears non-random and purpose-driven. The structure and organization of its sequences are specific and coherent, guiding precise biochemical processes. Information theorists suggest that such functional coherence in DNA is similar to a well-designed code in software or engineering. The debate centers around whether complex, functionally coherent information like that found in DNA requires intentional design, or if it can arise through natural processes alone. Critics of naturalistic evolution argue that the apparent purposefulness of DNA structure suggests design. Conversely, evolutionary biologists argue that DNA's complexity can be explained through natural processes over long time periods, even if gaps remain in our understanding. My humble opinion, those who ever created not just code but system architecture would agree, DNA is a genius program. The evolution of human cognition and intelligence. The rapid development of human cognitive abilities, such as abstract reasoning, problem-solving, and language, presents a significant challenge to traditional evolutionary explanations. These traits require a substantial increase in brain size and complexity, which comes at high metabolic costs. The human brain is significantly larger and more complex than that of our closest evolutionary relatives. While the average brain size of early hominins was about 400 to 500 cubic centimeters, modern human brains average around 1,350 cubic centimeters. This expansion occurred relatively rapidly in evolutionary terms, mainly in the frontal cortex, which is associated with advanced cognitive functions. The human brain is incredibly energy-intensive. It uses about 20% of our body's total energy, despite accounting for only about 2% of our body weight. This high metabolic cost raises an evolutionary question. Why would such an energy-demanding organ be favored, especially given that other organs essential for survival could have used that energy? It is unclear how natural selection would favor such traits, given that many of the benefits of advanced cognition would not have been immediately relevant to survival in early human environments. There are other arguments about unanswered problems with the scientific concept of human appearance, but the most important fact to mention is that evolution doesn't address how life started in the first place. This is the field of abiogenesis, the leap from chemistry to biology. Scientists are still working on solving how it occurred. While there have been advances in prebiotic chemistry, no consensus exists on how self-replicating molecules or the first primitive cells arose naturally. So the whole scientific idea of how humans appeared is based on the absence of evidence and any definitive experiment that can show how life could have started from non-living matter. But science insists on mutations and natural selection. It's like insisting you know how a red time travel machine is created, just as a time travel machine should somehow appear and exist, but you know how to paint it red. Scientists can now create reproductive cells, sperm and eggs, from other types of cells, such as skin or blood cells. In mice, they have already successfully created viable embryos using sperm and eggs derived from skin cells, and these embryos have developed into healthy offspring. But again, existing live cells are used to become reprogrammed, not just sets of amino acids. Because science cannot and doesn't know how to breathe life in non-living materials, guess who can? DNA was sequenced and decoded several decades ago, and hypotheses, like Darwin's, are still circulating. It is too hastily renamed to a theory, because it is not proven to full extent, no matter how widely supported and elevated it is. Proof is scientifically obligatory for a hypothesis to become a theory. There are several ways to prove assumptions into theories: mathematical proof, experiment, or if experimentation is not possible, like with world creation, the hypothesis suggested should explain all, underline all, existing observations of the area it refers to, and even predict outcomes or future events. None of these proving methods has been achieved for the evolution hypothesis in almost 200 years of its existence, which doesn't make it automatically false, however, not a theory. That is the elegant beauty of scientific method. Darwin's idea is yet only an interpretation of his observations on Galapagos Islands. It was suggested in 1858 to 1859, was fresh and new at that time, and allowed natural sciences to find a foundation to separate from the church. However, with the current means of DNA exploration, this hypothesis doesn't stand up to criticism. But science, having only this one, doesn't hurry to decline it, because then the question of how humans appeared becomes unanswered. And the only answer would be the one that all religions give, that it was intentionally created, which would circle science back to the point it stood at before trying to prove belief in God is dark and wrong. But that was all about the body. And what about the soul or spirit? Psychologists work with that. Sigmund Freud proposed the concepts of the id, ego, and superego to refer to the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious parts of the personality. Without such distinctions, many mental states, particularly in extreme cases, are difficult to explain. Carl Gustav Jung suggested the idea of archetypes, universal templates and patterns for thoughts and behavior. But the question is, where are these archetypes stored? How do different people access them in their thought processes, given that no specific neurons or neural connections dedicated to this information have been identified? So, where are they? Not all psychologists subscribe to Jungian theory, nor do they fully embrace Freud's views on the driving forces of personality, such as libido and mortido. However, even those who don't follow Jung or Freud still acknowledge the importance of both the conscious and subconscious. The growth of psychology today demonstrates that working with these hidden layers of the mind is effective. Without accounting for the subconscious, many behavioral patterns and reactions, if not all of them, cannot be adequately explained or changed. To gain a deeper understanding of the mind, it's essential to recognize the division between the visible and hidden parts of our consciousness. Another big question is, what exactly is the mind and consciousness from a scientific perspective? We still don't have a definitive answer. While neurons in our brain represent the mechanisms of thought, they don't explain where thoughts originate, who initiates them, or how. Who is the me that is thinking? The experience of being a conscious subject, the I that thinks and feels, remains one of the most challenging mysteries in science. Scientific and philosophical approaches to understanding consciousness and the self, like emergent property of the brain, or integrated inference concept, or global workspace concept. Science tends to explain the self as a dynamic process, rather than a fixed entity. If science generally explains the self and consciousness as emergent properties of brain processes, and AI can simulate brain-like functions, then why is there still so much debate about whether AI could ever become conscious? It should be already then. But science then distinguishes experience and simulation. While the act of simulation is itself a form of subjective experience, even if it's different from original experience. And then there are different levels of experience, and therefore, different types of consciousness, means AI might achieve some aspects of consciousness. Philosophers have long debated whether the self is something more than just brain processes. Concepts like the hard problem of consciousness question how subjective experience, qualia, the sense of what it's like to be you, arises from the physical brain. While science has made great steps in understanding how thoughts and actions are represented in the brain, the nature of the self and consciousness remains an area of active research and deep philosophical inquiry. No wonder that Vedas distinguish the creation of mind as a separate stage of world creation before any creatures including humans were formed. Vedas also differ between created mind, manas, and eternal, non-created consciousness, chit, or chaitanya, where consciousness is the very essence of reality, inseparable from the ultimate, unchanging reality. It is not bound by time, creation or destruction, is beyond the material world and existed before any creation. While the mind functions as a bridge between the material world and the soul, consciousness itself is considered eternal and fundamental. Such a concept easily explains psychophysical parallelism and resolves scientific philosophical debates at ease. But it needs a free intellect to accept the idea of eternal, the idea of God, which is difficult to arrogant ego. By the way, intellect, buddhi, and ego, ahamakara, are also stages of world creation, preceding mind formation. I encourage you to watch my other video about world creation, linked in the description. In one way or another, it becomes clear that we need concepts beyond just the body and brain to fully grasp the incredibly complex concept of humans. Across many traditions, whether from the Bible, Vedas, ancient Egypt, there seems to be a convergence on similar ideas. Human beings are more than their physical bodies, possessing an eternal, individualized soul and God's spirit, and the mind is an essential tool for interacting with the external world and shaping personality. And the heart is viewed as a sacred vessel for divine presence. And all these aspects are part of divine creation, while consciousness is the pure, unchanging awareness that exists prior to creation, and is present in all beings as the true essence of the self. Though science cannot fully refute or confirm any of these beliefs being limited with material boundaries, What is the probability that such profound ideas stem from a single source of knowledge? My answer: the probability of God. I hope you enjoyed this video and discovered some new and captivating ideas today. I am deeply grateful to everyone who supports me. If you haven't yet and would like to, please support me by links below or by using the super thanks button on YouTube. Thank you for every like, comment, and subscription. See you in my next video.